All right, Scott. Thank you for joining us today and talking about your recent NSF NIH proposal that was funded. I know it was a little bit of a different hybrid here. So we're just going to go through some of these questions. The first question is, how did you locate and identify funding opportunities for your work?
So for me, I found the things that work the best are word of mouth and social media. So I get on Twitter and I follow relevant program officers, relevant offices within agencies. I have tried searching agency websites. I have tried setting up alerts with Pivot. And I kind of fall between some weird interdisciplinary cracks. So those strategies that are stock and trade for this area haven't worked as well for me as just, again, getting connected with the people who are doing work kind of like the work I'm doing or reasonably close to the work I'm doing, and getting connected with program officers and programs and seeing what they put out into the social media world.
That's super helpful. So how are you able to locate the program officers themselves?
I mean, usually when the agency handles or the word of mouth will send me a funding opportunity announcement that looks interesting. And then I go to that and then skip down to the bottom of the page to find out who the cognizant program officers are. And so I usually, for what I've done, I've found the mechanisms first and the program officers second.
So next question, what do you wish you had known before you had received the award?
I mean, the thing that comes to mind most immediately is I wish I had kind of a contact map for the internal UT bureaucracy, if that makes sense, right? What are questions for my department manager? What are questions for COLA post award? What are questions for the OSP concierge? It's hard to figure out early on exactly how to route those types of things, how to make sure you're doing budgeting issues correctly. And, everybody's been really great about it. If I send an email to the wrong person, they send me to the right person. And oftentimes we all end up in one big group email.
Thank you. So next question, what were some unexpected hurdles and how did you overcome them?
The biggest unexpected hurdle I had in this current project was we had done an estimate based on a sample of where we were going to find our data and how much data was easily available online. And something about the sampling we didn't work right. And the data was much more difficult to get than we had anticipated it would be. And it was going to require tons of human labor hours in order to get the data. And those were human labor hours that we hadn't budgeted for. What I ended up doing was I ended up kind of aggressively advertising on Eureka for undergraduate research assistants, and got a lot of folks through the Bridging Barriers program on campus and through the regular undergraduate research experience.
That's great. Had you had experience, sort of working, training undergraduates to do research before this, or was it sort of you know, was this a new thing, skill that you
So
had to learn?
it was new at scale for sure. So I had occasionally worked with one undergraduate at a time through more traditional undergraduate research apprenticeship programs. But so the idea of bringing 6 or 8 folks in at once and developing basically a training program for them and creating the infrastructure to manage them, to assign tasks, all of that, that was brand new. And that was a lot of scramble in the first semester that I did it, just trying to figure out as I was doing it, right? Laying down one piece of pavement, one step ahead of me at a time to get it running. And once I had the infrastructure in place, it works fairly well now, but there was a brief moment of panic.
What was your approach to project or team management?
I guess I describe myself as kind of an infrastructuralist about these things. And so I build systems that help manage and coordinate activity. So a lot of that's around creating a digital ecology of Slack channels and shared G drives and box drives and spreadsheets that manage activity. Some of that's also about making sure early on in a project that you discuss with everybody to get details on who's going to do what, how's credit sharing going to work, how's publication going to work.
Thank you for that. Next question is, how was writing a grant proposal different from say, writing an article or a book or a different kind of monograph?
I think that grant proposals are a lot more about the project team than any other kind of proposal, right? Who are the investigators that are involved, and are the investigators that are involved legible to the reviewers who are going to be reviewing the application? So when I think about a article or book or monograph, I'm just writing essentially what I want to write. Obviously I target it to a journal or a book series. I understand the disciplinary audience broadly, but I've served on a few grant proposal review committees. And the first time I was really surprised by how much time the group spent discussing the investigator track record, where the investigator publishes, the investigator's foundational training. And so I think I spent a lot of time banging my head against the wall of grant proposals, sending in what I think were quality projects and getting rejected because I didn't have anybody on the team that fit the team expectations for what the reviewers wanted. But I think bringing in the folks that fit what the reviewers were expecting did a lot for me.
That makes sense. One follow-up question. Talked about how useful it was to be on those review committees. What was the process like for you to get on one of those committees, for example?
So, I mean, for me, I was just invited to be on the first committee and then started talking with program officers and was invited to be on more. I do know folks who have just reached out to program officers and thrown their hat in the ring. And I was advised to do it, and I was probably too shy and didn't get around to doing it early enough. I would recommend other people be less shy than me and just reach out to the program officer and try to get behind the scenes.
That makes a lot of sense. Great. Thank you. So next question is, what input did you receive from colleagues or program officers, I guess, about the proposal?
Yeah. So again, later, as I started bringing in more team members from different disciplinary perspectives onto my projects, they were, of course, instrumental in developing the projects and shifting the focus and adding their disciplinary expertise. I really thrive in that sort of interdisciplinary teamwork environment, and I think the proposals all got better because of that.
Thank you for that. And here's the final question. What advice would you give someone who's having trouble putting together a grant application?
So I think it's really important to spend a lot of time with the request for proposals and talking to people who have already been funded for similar work or in similar areas. I think one of my problems early on when I was having more trouble getting funded was being a little too wedded to my vision for the project and not imagining how I could adapt the project to what the agencies or programs were looking to fund. You may have the best project in the world, and if it doesn't fit within that portfolio, they're not going to be able to fund it. And so I think there's a lot of trade-offs in imagining how can you do something that advances your disciplinary or scholarly goals within the framework of what the agencies and programs are set up to fund.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, can I ask going back, one word you
Sure.
used, which I thought was interesting. You said making sure that the proposal is legible to, I guess, the reviewers. Could you just define legible in this context?
Yeah, I mean, so my experience is that reviewers are generally recruited fairly narrowly disciplinarily, if that makes sense. And so depending on the scope of the project, you expect to see not just one discipline in the room ever, but the set of most obvious candidates for working in this area. And so if you're coming from a different discipline that doesn't normally tackle projects in that area, or there isn't a member of your discipline on the review committee, which is very rare for me, there's almost no rhetorician reviewers in any agency, then you don't have somebody in the room who can say, oh, this is legit, this is a reasonable area of inquiry, and we can trust it, and we can trust this person. It's really important in that case to make sure that you are getting a good sense of who's actually going to be in the room in terms of reviewers. They're really hard to branch out and bring in teams, but if you're not applying to the kinds of funding that's narrowly prescribed for your discipline, I think you can really help yourself out a lot by bringing in a team member who looks a lot like the people in the room, disciplinarily speaking, who will be making the decisions.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. It makes a lot of sense. I think we're done. So I'm gonna just
Okay.
pause. Yep.